that the only mission that Donald Trump has is making sure that he can line his pockets, line Elon's pockets, and any other billionaire, all at our expense. It's not just going to be the people you dislike that are going to miss out on their Medicare, Medicaid, or their Social Security. Or down in the state of Florida, where two of these seats are, they are talking about getting rid of FEMA. It is time to wake up, and it doesn't mean that you're a Democrat if you vote democratically.
So this is where...
Señores, los republicanos del movimiento MAGA acaban de cometer el peor error en toda la historia del Congreso: crear el subcomité Dodge del Departamento de Eficiencia Gubernamental. Y es que, sin darse cuenta, le han dado a los demócratas más afilados una plataforma perfecta para exponer toda la corrupción y todos los trapitos sucios de Elon Musk. Exactamente es lo que demócratas como Jasmine Crockett, como lo es Jamie Raskin, salen a dejar en evidencia. Y no solo eso, sino que también hasta aprovechan para retarlo cara a cara para que se presente a testificar. Sean bienvenidos a Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Amigos, hoy tenemos mucha información que hablar. Veremos cómo Jasmine Crockett lo ha confrontado a Elon Musk para que se presente y pueda testificar. No es la única, porque también veremos cómo Jamie Raskin ha callado a un republicano frente a todo el Congreso. Y por último veremos cómo es que Zelensky acaba de arremeter contra Trump luego de ser atacado. Veremos al final un poco de política exterior. Así que los invito a que se queden hasta el final de este video porque tenemos los detalles más interesantes. Pues amigos, si tanto presumen de todo lo que está haciendo en Dodge Elon Musk, si tanto dicen que no está infringiendo la ley, entonces, ¿por qué es que Elon Musk no se anima a dar la cara? La manera en la cual Jasmine Crockett lo ha confrontado fue brutal. Así que quiero que vayamos directo a ver esta joyita antes de la intervención.
On the front lines of the effort to push back against Donald Trump and Elon Musk, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett is a Democrat of Texas. She's a member of the House Oversight Committee on Doge. Congresswoman, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah.
This is a tricky one. Now, you have the benefit of you were not a member of Congress in the first Trump administration. You were in government, but this is what's your take on what resistance looks like for you, for me, for society, for those lawyers at the DOJ? What are you supposed to do?
Yeah, so first of all, hats off to each and every person who literally said that I have some ethics about myself and therefore I'm just going to resign. That's as it relates to the DOJ as well as every other agency. The scary part about this, though, is that only his lackeys will be left running our governmental agencies, whatever is left of those governmental agencies. When I think about resistance, though, I've had a lot of conversations, and one of the things that keeps coming up is how the former governor of this state was consistently doing daily briefings in the midst of COVID because we couldn't trust anything that Donald Trump was saying about the pandemic.
Right.
So everyone tuned in to really what almost was like the shadow president, the guy that was going to give us facts and not tell us to inject ourselves with bleach.
Right.
I think that we need to do something similar to that because all they're going to do, him and his new press secretary, is spew lies upon lies upon lies. We need to daily brief the American people. That's number one. Number two, a lot of people are talking about, you know what, we just are looking forward to the midterms. We only need 3 more seats. I'm sure everybody's tired of getting emails, text messages, phone calls, trying to raise money. But the reality is that we have an opportunity right now. I know that a lot of people look at these seats that are available, which there's going to be a total of 3, and they say these are deep red seats. But here's the thing. We saw that in the state of Iowa, they swung a seat 27 points so that a Democrat could win. I say we have nothing to lose. We need to go out. We need to talk to those people that finally understand that the only mission that Donald Trump has is making sure that he can line his pockets, line Elon's pockets, and any other billionaire, all at our expense. It's not just going to be the people you dislike that are going to miss out on their Medicare, Medicaid, or their Social Security. Or down in the state of Florida, where 2 of these seats are, they are talking about getting rid of FEMA. It is time to wake up, and it doesn't mean that you're a Democrat if you vote Democratically.
So this is where I want to get to. Who's the audience to swing some of these states? Is it progressives who understand that their priorities are being crushed, or is it people who voted Republican to whom you say, you didn't vote for this, did you?
Exactly.
You didn't vote for Elon Musk and a guy named Big Balls to have your documentation.
Yeah.
How does that message get out there in a way that entire audience hears it?
I think that you're right. Definitely the entire audience. I just don't know how many progressives exist in Matt Gaetz' former district, right? But I do think that there are farmers in that district, farmers that are concerned because they rely upon monies as it relates to USAID and other monies that are now being dismantled. And it means that you may lose your family farm. It may be bought up by a corporate organization. And so I think just having very real conversations, we've seen people who have talked about, well, we don't want you firing the people at the VA, or maybe it's somebody that has to fly all the time and they're concerned because we have a record number of planes literally falling out of the sky because he decided he was going to appoint some guy from Fox to be over transportation. But at the end of the day, there were those that never believed that we could end up with 2 senators in the state of Georgia, and we did. There were those that never believed we could have a Democrat representing Alabama, and in that special election, we did. So I think if there's any point in time that the people should rise up and figure out where should I focus my attention, it's on these special elections, and it's having real conversations on the doors with real people talking about what's really happening and not the lies that they're putting out there.
I want to go back to this idea. There are a lot of people frustrated about where a lot of Democrats are in this mix.
Yeah.
You're out there a lot. We've talked several times. You've got a take on everything that happens. This concept about a daily briefing. It's we've talked about whether we should act more like a parliamentary system here, where the opposition's got a job to do every day, and you see them as often as you see a prime minister. What does that look like? Have you had this conversation with a lot of your colleagues about how this looks?
I've been trying to work through it because I think when we compare it to what was happening in COVID, it was just one subject.
Right.
And for us as Democrats, we like to have experts. We don't just want to talk in mouth, right? And so it's a matter of how do we know what's coming to make sure that we've got the right expert on hand. But I think that it would be great if at least maybe every Friday we have a different attorney general or the same one that talks about the status of the cases, right? I think that there's things that we can do. We can just maybe decide on what days we're going to have transportation, and maybe we can pull on Secretary Buttigieg to come through and say, this is the day that I will pick up and I will talk about what's happening at FAA. I think we also have to start having some field hearings. We've got to go into their territory. We've got to explain to people in rural America, the reason that you don't have hospitals is because of their policies. The reasons you're not going to have schools is because of their policies. The reason that you had access to more jobs, more health care, as well as the next level of farming was because Democrats were the ones that wanted to make sure that you could have broadband access. We've got to start having the conversations instead of just ceding the territory, because the reality is that right now they're trying to cut SNAP benefits. You know who uses more SNAP benefits than anybody else? It's rural America. It's not urban America. We have a story for every single person who's not a billionaire in this country, and it's time for us to tell it.
So you had an interesting story, which I wasn't going to bring up because my parents watched this show, but you were involved in a hearing with Elon Musk about condoms. Right? Do you remember this whole?
It wasn't with Elon. Elon, if you're watching, come through, boo, because you haven't shown up to the Doge subcommittee yet.
Right, and you called him out at that subcommittee.
Yes.
But this became weird because Buddy Carter, your colleague from Georgia, started talking about how we were giving condoms to the...
Pues bueno, amigos, ¿no? ¿Cómo no querer a Yasmín Crockett? Esta es esa energía que se necesita. Así es como los demócratas tienen que enfrentar estas situaciones. No se trata solo de salir y hablar bonito en una entrevista, ¿no? Tienen que desafiar directamente a Elon Musk y dejarlo sin excusas. O sea, imaginen el escándalo mediático que se armaría si es que Elon Musk aceptara testificar, cosa que dudo, porque ya sabemos, ¿no? No lo hará. Pero bueno, incluso si se niega, también es una historia en sí misma, ¿no? No queriendo obedecer a una citación, algo que por cierto los republicanos bloquearon cuando los demócratas intentaron forzarlo a comparecer, Claro, porque ellos, como manejan el subcomité, no les conviene que Elon Musk hable, ¿no? Y ojo, que quien está en la cabeza de este subcomité es nada más y nada menos que Marjorie Taylor Greene. Así que sí, ellos dicen que Elon no está al mando de Dodge, pero eso es mentira. Lo peor es que va en contra de un documento legal que él mismo firmó. Es decir, otra mentira más, otro delito más. Entonces no me extraña que no quieran hablar del tema. La clave es que se haga ruido con esto, que todos sepan que Musk está huyendo de dar explicaciones. Por eso lo que hizo Jasmine Crockett es tan importante. Veamos qué dijo.
Our democracy. Well, he did say he'd be a dictator on day one. Oh, Democrats, you know, it's just Trump. He just talks. Well, let me tell you something. He is doing more than talking. We talked about Project 2025. We talked about the consolidation of power. We talked about how he wanted to be a king. We talked about in a democratic republic, that is not what it is. We have some sort of checks and balances, and he is doing everything that he can to get rid of those checks and balances. The DOJ and the people that he's going after were simply doing their jobs. The problem is that Americans thought that it was okay to take a full-fledged criminal and make him the president of the United States, and then they want to act aghast when he does criminal things. Let me tell you, we have a thug in charge of the United States, and if we don't wake up, we may not have a United States, because right now he has only been successful in being a divider in chief.
Una auténtica estrella, ¿no? Ojalá tuviéramos 10, 20 o 50 más como ella. Da esta sensación de que no descansa, que no se detiene un solo segundo, ¿no? Pero eso está bien, porque sabe que es crucial seguir presionando, seguir denunciando, seguir exponiendo. Hay varias palabras con C que me gustaría usar para describir a Elon Musk. Pero bueno, por ahora nos quedamos con corrupto y criminal. Pasemos a la siguiente noticia, mis amigos, porque Jamie Raskin también tuvo su momento en el Congreso. Ya sabemos que los republicanos, no todos, pero la mayoría de estos últimos tiempos son unos cobardes. Y eso no es novedad. Pero lo que acaba de pasar lo ha dejado más claro que nunca. Jamie Raskin ha expuesto una nueva propuesta de ley que los republicanos MAGA en la Cámara de Representantes están impulsando. Básicamente quieren renunciar a todo su poder y entregárselo a Elon Musk y a Donald Trump. Todas las leyes más importantes, ¿no? Las protectoras, las que se aprobaron en el último año de la administración de Biden. Todo esto, amigos, es completamente absurdo. Y bueno, tal y como lo dijo Jamie Raskin, una estupidez total. Pero lo mejor es que él no se quedó callado, les dio una pequeña cátedra brutal a los republicanos, dejándolos en ridículo. Y bueno, vamos a ver qué es lo que dijo.
The purpose of the gentleman's bill is not to give Congress the power to undo midnight rules, because Congress already has that power. Under the Congressional Review Act, House Republicans can go to the floor this week and they can try to undo every single regulation that was issued by the Biden administration from August of last year to Inauguration Day. So what does their bill do? Well, it would allow the majority to roll up lots of midnight regulations and lots of others too, including what you might call twilight, midday, and early morning regulations. Indeed, all of the regulations adopted in the final 365 days of the prior administration. An entire year that takes place at midnight. All the regulations adopted in the last year could be tied together into a bundle, wrapped up together in a giant bunch, and then voted down as a single jumbo resolution. This tactic could be used to try to get Congress to eliminate no fewer, by my count, than 355 major regulations from the last year of Joe Biden in one fell swoop, forcing every member to vote either to sustain all of the regulations or to overturn and destroy all of them. And by destroying them, that means the agencies could not try to promulgate similar regulations in the future without an act of Congress. This would allow Trump's enablers and the sheep-like new Elon Muskovites in Congress to obliterate hundreds of completely diverse and unrelated regulations in one fell swoop. Everything from, these are regulations that were adopted over the last year, everything from removing lead from drinking water, to making cell phones compatible with hearing aids, to creating safety standards for infant bath seats, to implementing the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Mr. Speaker, the reason that 43 states have constitutional or statutory single subject rules for policy legislation, initiatives, and referendum is because voting on completely different subjects at the same time is a moronic way to govern and an invitation to political manipulation of the will of the people. What's a member to do if he or she strongly approves of, say, overturning 20% of these rules, but strongly opposes overturning 80% of them? This weird dilemma makes us ask why we would even want to force such a choice. After all, the vast majority of America rejects this whole concept. Well, the obvious purpose of this bizarre legislation is to get Republicans to vote to repeal extremely popular common sense regulations, but then try to enable them to escape the political consequences of doing so. Look, consider some of the Biden administration regulations which they would tuck into this monstrosity omnibus midnight relief resolution, and decide if you're willing to vote to overturn them, even if they're tucked in with some infamous washing machine regulation they love talking about. Consider this one from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It cuts credit card late fees from an average of $32 to $8, meaning your credit card company cannot charge you more than $8 for late fees because the CFPB brought a suit and determined that's the whole administrative cost of a late fee. It didn't say the credit card companies couldn't charge anything, but it said when they're charging you $32, that's just a ripoff. Now, our friends on that side of the aisle want to repeal this regulation because they insist it violates their precious laissez-faire principle. That is, let the credit card companies do whatever they want. But when it comes to leaving middle class and working class consumers to the mercy of gigantic credit card companies, my friends, laissez isn't fair. At least that's what the Democrats think, and we will stand up for this regulation. But if you think the credit card companies should be restored their power to charge whatever they want for late fees, way beyond their actual administrative expenses, then by all means support the Republicans' bill. Elon Musk and the billionaires will love you for it. Musk did, after all, just sign an agreement with Visa for his X wallet.
Señores, los republicanos están tratando de destruir el gobierno lo más rápido y peligrosamente posible. Ven aviones cayendo del cielo. Y su solución es seguir quitando más regulaciones, seguir despidiendo a gente que trabaja en estas áreas. Ven corrupción y lo primero que piensan es eliminar a más empleados del gobierno. Quieren acabar con toda la supervisión posible. Y tal y como lo dijo Raskin, esta es una manera completamente tonta de gobernar, pero es justo lo que buscan. Su objetivo es demostrar que el gobierno no funciona. Y como lo hacen, pues gobernando de la peor manera posible para que la gente pierda esta fe en las instituciones. Dicen que el gobierno es un desastre, y en lugar de arreglarlo, lo hacen aún peor. Mientras tanto, Trump sigue moviendo sus piezas para consolidar más poder. Ya lo hizo en su primera presidencia, y lo está haciendo otra vez con esta nueva agencia Dodge. Busca simplemente centralizar todo el control en sus manos. Todo esto forma parte, ¿no?, de una estrategia de Trump mucho más grande. No solo quiere desmantelar el gobierno porque sí, quiere construir un aparato de intimidación, asegurarse de que nadie se atreva a desafiarlo, porque aunque a veces parezca imparable, él sabe que hay muchas maneras en las cuales sigue siendo vulnerable. Por eso es que necesita reforzar su poder. Por eso es que tiene a Mike Johnson, completamente dominado. Trump no sabe gobernar de otra manera que no sea como un jefe mafioso. Pero ojo amigos, no significa que en sí ya todo esté finalizado, ¿no? Que sea el fin. Cada vez se encuentran formas de debilitar el poder. Aunque sean pequeñas victorias, estas victorias duelen más de lo que imaginamos. Pues perfecto, señores, pasamos a la última noticia de hoy. Y es que Zelensky ha arremetido en contra de Trump. Señores, lo que acaba de pasar es una locura. Así de entrada. Donald Trump y su gente han estado diciendo cosas terribles, ¿no? Sobre Ucrania. Han estado atacando constantemente al presidente Zelensky y de algún modo se demuestra que están alabando a Putin. Es creo que indignante ver todo esto, luego de que Biden de algún modo logró unir a Estados Unidos y al mundo en apoyo a Ucrania. Pero claro, Trump no es lo que quiere y lo está tirando todo a la basura. Lo peor, amigos, es que hizo un post en su red social donde se lanzó contra Zelensky. Pero ojo, que el presidente de Ucrania no se quedó callado y le respondió con todo. A ver, para poder entender bien lo que pasó esta semana, escuchemos un resumen de Lawrence O'Donnell.
Know how different that would have been if the United States had a president like Donald Trump during World War II. Donald Trump broke with the United States allies fighting Russian dictator Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine by sending a delegation led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio to a meeting in Saudi Arabia to negotiate with the murderous dictator Vladimir Putin's representatives. Here is the way Senator Marco Rubio saw Vladimir Putin before becoming Donald Trump's Secretary of State.
A gangster in Russia is threatening NATO, threatening the unity of Europe, and now expanding his reach into the Middle East at our expense.
That is the way Winston Churchill and President Roosevelt talked about Adolf Hitler's march across Europe, invading every country along the way. The countries that are now unified against Vladimir Putin's Hitler-style invasion of Ukraine. Here's what Secretary Rubio said today about his meeting with the people who work for what he used to call a gangster in Russia.
I came away today convinced that they are willing to begin to engage in a serious process to determine how and how quickly and through what mechanism can an end be brought to this war. Whether we can ultimately reach that outcome will obviously depend on every side in this conflict's willingness to agree to certain things.
Es que es patético, ¿no? O sea, estamos hablando de un aliado, de un país que está luchando por su supervivencia. Y Trump simplemente repite los mismos discursos de Putin. Lo peor es que arrastra a otros republicanos con él, como lo es Marco Rubio, que bueno, prácticamente ya vendió su alma. Pero bueno, lo importante es ver el post que publicó Trump, porque probablemente sea lo más loco que ha escrito. Y luego veremos la respuesta de Zelensky. Veamos el post. Él escribió este post larguísimo en Truth Social diciendo, y cito lo siguiente: un comediante medianamente exitoso llamado Zelensky convenció a Estados Unidos de gastar 350.000 millones en una guerra que no se podía ganar, que nunca debió comenzar. Pero sin Estados Unidos y sin Trump nunca podrá terminar. Y bueno, sigue con la queja de siempre, ¿no? Que Europa no ha puesto suficiente dinero, que Biden no supo negociar, que Ucrania es un desastre y que Zelensky es prácticamente un dictador. O sea, es decir, según Trump, ahora Zelensky es el problema, no lo es Putin. Y bueno, luego viene con la locura de que solo él puede negociar el fin de la guerra, algo que prometió y hasta ahora no cumplió. Pero lo que realmente molesta es que dice que millones han muerto innecesariamente. Y no Trump. No murieron porque Zelensky quiso. Murieron porque Putin invadió su país. O sea, es impresionante lo descarado que puede ser. Veamos la respuesta de Zelensky.
And you know, I said, what are you doing? You guys, all you talk about is Russia, and they should be sitting at the table. I think Putin would love to be back.
President Donald Trump there repeatedly echoing Russian talking points about a number of things, including the war in Ukraine, just hours after a U.S. delegation sat down with Russian negotiators in Saudi Arabia to discuss plans to end the war in Ukraine without, we should note, any representative from Ukraine, the country that was invaded, in that room. Trump went so far as to falsely claim that somehow Ukraine and Ukrainians started the war.
I think I have the power to end this war. and I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
The talks between the U.S. and Russia lasted 4 hours. This morning, the Kremlin says talks between Trump and Putin could take place by the end of this month. That's quite soon. While Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is very much pushing back against Trump's latest comments.
Unfortunately, President Trump, I have great respect for him as a leader of a nation that we have great respect for. The American people who always support us, unfortunately lives in this disinformation space.
Obviamente, Zelensky pues tuvo que responder con diplomacia, ¿no? Dijo que Trump está en una burbuja de desinformación, que simplemente no tiene ni la menor idea de lo que está diciendo y es la verdad. Yo sinceramente hubiera preferido que Zelensky simplemente dijera: Donald Trump, eres un tonto. Punto final. Pero bueno, lo que está pasando, amigos, es hasta un punto asqueroso. Donald Trump está repitiendo la propaganda del Kremlin, mientras Ucrania sigue luchando y sigue perdiendo vidas. Lo peor es que hay gente que se lo cree.
I think I have the power to end this war, and I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
You should have never started it. He's saying that to Ukraine.
Yeah, it's ghastly. Ukraine was invaded by Russia in violation of every fundamental principle of international law, and the Ukrainians have resisted far better and far longer than anyone would have expected or had a right to expect of them. And by resisting, they've allowed the rest of us throughout the West, throughout the world, to have a chance to engage in more or less normal politics for the last.
Y aquí estamos de nuevo, viendo lo peor del trumpismo en acción. Como siempre, no es sorprendente, ¿no? Pero sigue siendo asqueroso. Por eso, señores, es que hay que seguir denunciando lo que sucede. Señores, hemos llegado hasta el final de este video. Si es que llegaron hasta este punto, muchísimas gracias. Como siempre, los invito a que le den un like, compartan este video con sus amigos y se suscriban a nuestro canal Políticamente en Desacuerdo. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.